Sid, thank you so much for being on the Mani Kamra podcast. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Most welcome, and the pleasure's on mine, Manik.
Right. So one term that you mentioned called grandstanding. So when we were having a discussion, and this is a term that drawn my attention. I looked it up on Google, and I understand there's a term for it. So can you address that? Can you explain that for our listeners?
It's really simple. See, oftentimes what happens is there are a lot of opinions that people that have even half of a public personality need to make. Like I remember during this entire Sushant Singh thing, uh, ये नहीं देखा जाता, we weren't really considering who was sort of coming out in support or tweeting about it or whatever. We were looking at who wasn't. So it becomes a very sensitive issue sometimes for public figures to either make statements or not make them. Not making them is also sort of making a statement. The idea of grandstanding, therefore, Manik, is that someone makes an opinion basically to pander to the general norm or to gain the approval of society per se. They do it not because they necessarily believe in it, but they do it because nahi to log kya kahenge. Like it's one of those things where you do it just for the heck of it. You do it simply because you want people to realize that you are one of them. And it is in this attempt of bringing this concept of relativity closer to people, right? It is in an attempt to want to be part of the crowd that people sort of miss out the whole idea of speaking the truth. I understand that there are a lot of PR reasons why one might want to say something or one might not want to say something, but eventually when it comes down to two things: a principle, that is what you should be talking about and what you shouldn't be talking about, and b what your own self belief is. When you start considering those two things, you start to wonder, do practices like grandstanding really make me closer to people? Because while I might be able to put myself in a position where I'm relating with a lot of people, or people are relating with me, I'm not really sort of putting out my own personality. I'm not really putting out my true self. Grandstanding, in my opinion, is basically that, right? And of course, it's like it's a multiple edged sword. I can't even call it a double edged sword, because it works in the favor of a lot of people in a lot of situations. And the problem with things like grandstanding is, if done right, you fall into the habit of doing it over and over again. You fall into this trend, this pattern where you say, you know what, if it's worked once, how can we go wrong with it? And somewhere down the line, you just become what people that listen to you or follow you or love you or care about you just want you to become. And that just takes away from who you genuinely are, and that just takes away from the whole point of you expressing your own opinions in your own way. So that's grandstanding in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Very interesting, Sid. And I think this grandstanding has always been around even before the social media, right? And today we are going to talk about the social media versus reality. And one question that I want to ask you: how did we reach at this point? Uh, what was the initial objective of social media, and how has it evolved, or how has it changed in the in coming years? That so that we have reached to this point, that is grandstanding, that we go with the flow, we say whatever we feel that would be socially acceptable, right? So how did we reach at this point, and what was the initial objective of social media?
See, Manik, I am genuinely of the belief that we are a pendulum. Our society is basically oscillating from one end to the other and then back. Because
Mm, yeah, yeah.
we started off as a society trying to sort of live in communities, trying to sort of be with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And slowly and gradually, with the rise of separatism and isolation and cultures which people's independence and things like that,
Yeah.
which of course has its merits and demerits and all that. But once that started happening, people started secluding themselves from everyone else, right? And people started distancing themselves. We became
Mm.
further apart.
Right. Yes. Mm-hmm.
The whole mind your own business thing became a culture then, and more so in the West than I think in the Eastern Hemisphere, because uh, people started looking at families as liabilities and started putting dollar figures to it at that point of time and things like that, and we became very impersonal people. Also, this might sound very cliche, but hey, capitalism had a part to play in all of this.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. Yes.
it's yeah, and it's just one of those things where now, early 2000s, where we said, you know what are we doing? The whole idea of being secluded and being isolated translated to being lonely, and um, we became slightly more aware of the value of personal interaction, of human interaction. And we are basically, what happened was, at the time, we wanted to try and go back to the same old culture of togetherness and community life and things like that, without the hassle of breaking this trend of isolation. So while the pendulum wanted to swing the other way, the best way of going about it was for people to say, all right, let's come up with a high five or a Friendster or a Facebook, wherein people can basically do two things. One, interact with the people that they may be geographically away from, and B, have a safe space so that they can cast their opinions. Now, here's the problem with looking at both of these issues in isolation. The thing is, you can't do one without the other. When you are putting people in touch with one another, be it someone that is known to you or that is unknown to you, right? You're creating a social network, right? You're creating a network in that case. Um, and the thing is, with a social network comes the idea of expression. What do networks bond on? What is a commonality between people when you start forming a network or a group? What is the common aim behind the formation and the transformation of a collective? Um so so like, when people started sort of banding together or bonding over opinions and things like that, people started seeking commonality. You saw the rise of something like Facebook pages, Facebook groups. I remember I was on Friendster back in the day, way before it
Yeah.
turned into a dating site and then a gaming site. I was there, and then that also had its own sort of pages and groups and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and they were all based around the same idea, right? Um, so the thing
For
is,
the
we
commonality,
started
right?
it. Yes, and we started influencing each other. It's like, if I were to give you a very simple example, it's what happened with Game of Thrones, and at least what happened with Game of Thrones in the
Yeah.
Eastern Hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we anyway had a likeness towards the unrealistic world with
Yeah. The
serials like
fiction.
Nine on the
Fiction.
TV.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
needed, yeah, it's like extreme fiction. We just needed one friend of ours to say, "Arey bhai, kitna badhiya hai, come, let's watch it," and
Yes.
that was it, right? We
Yeah.
started influencing one another. Nobody has ever discovered Game of Thrones. Everyone has heard of it and then
Yeah.
watched it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, the whole idea of grandstanding stems from needing approval from the people that you're connected with. And,
Mm. The
as social media
social,
transforms.
the need of a human being to be, socially relevant.
Yes, and the thing is, Manik, in this entire duration, ever since the origin of these platforms to right now, the major transformation is that people have understood the power of social media to the extent that they know now that they can either monetize their social media or leverage their social media that would have monetary impact. So they have started to understand that your number of followers, your number of subscribers, your number of likes does
Yeah.
impact your revenue at the end of the day.
Mm.
And so,
Right.
in order to sort of either keep those likes and followers with you, or to attract newer followers and newer users to your content, you start making things, you start making statements, you start making content in general in any shape or form that
Yeah.
reaches out to the common public, and that basically tries to garner a lot of attention.
Mm-hmm.
One very simple example of grandstanding that I see on a lot of social media platforms is uh, people trying to follow the norm when it comes to content creation, right? So people saying everyone's making cooking videos, so I'm going to do it as well. You might not be a good cook. You'd be a terrible cook. You might have just watched a couple of recipes here and there, and then you just replicate it, make it look pretty, and sort of put it out. But that's not exactly what you're best at. I mean, sure, you're pretty good at this, and there's no taking away from the fact that you are making good content, therefore you're successful. But it only goes to show that your content creation process started. Its seed was from the fact that you wanted to please people, right? You wanted to have commercial value. You wanted it not to be a reflection of your true self, but you wanted to just say something or do something that people would like. So I think, yes, you are right in saying that grandstanding has started way before like social media happened. But now with the social media era, which has been going on for like almost 2 decades now, you have to understand it has become that much easier to start grandstanding, right? It has become that much easier for people to say, um, this is what I truly believe in, where they actually really probably don't. There's a good to fair chance they don't.
I think it has become easier to grandstand, and coincidentally, this was one of the things that I was talking to with one of my friends. We were talking about, like, how it's a human nature to find common grounds, right? And also, the social need of a person to be socially relevant and everything. So we're talking about that, and I think we have come to this point on social media that you say a lie for long enough, it becomes truth. The Google algorithm, it sort of picks up, and let's say uh, if I say that I am the prime minister of India, and a lot of other people start saying that, doing that in their blogs and everything, like on the internet, uh, there would be one point where it will be you Google who is the prime minister of India, and it might say Mani Kamra, right? So
Yeah,
I
man.
think
That's
yeah, I
that's
think
actually yeah, that's actually a very interesting point you brought up, because actually, if you look back, that's been happening since forever as well.
yeah, yeah,
People have been writing history books,
yeah.
and we
Absolutely,
have no
yes.
way to verify it,
True, true.
right? How one writes history is, again, the question historians keep asking themselves is, the foundation of what I have found today, is it even true? And then they have to go right back down to the roots to investigate and things like that. And
Yeah, yeah,
oftentimes the truth never really surfaces. But the problem is right now with social media, what you said about, you say something and it becomes the truth eventually. You keep saying it and it sticks at some point. It's really dangerous now more than ever, simply because now there's access, right? Now you have access to memories. Now you have digital records of everything that is being spoken, that is being, you know um, projected as the truth. uh,
yeah.
I have no idea what happened with Richard of Gloucester back in the day, because there's no digital record of it and there's therefore no way to verify it. But
Mm-hmm. Right.
what I do today on social media can very well be there for my kids and grandkids to see and come back to. So it's all
Absolutely.
a matter of, even if you're grandstanding and projecting something is the truth, that's how you will be remembered. And that's a very dangerous thing. Like, is that really the legacy you want to live? Because one chink in your armor, one crack where you show, all right, maybe this guy is really not believing in what he's saying, maybe he's just being hypocritical, um, is basically going to tarnish your reputation. Like, I'll give you a very good example, Manik. I did a video on YouTube which basically spoke about a lot of Bollywood celebrities and things like that, who came out, and sort of did not really oppose the whole Salman Khan incident when he said, he felt like a raped woman and all that. And it was almost to a point of a defense. and some of these actors and actresses have been advocating women's safety. I'm just saying there is an element of being a hypocrite that sort of ruins this entire trend of you grandstanding, and now it has also become easier to detect whether someone is just grandstanding or not. So social media sort of helps you both ways. It's just which way you choose to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, history was written by the winner, right? So the whoever wins
Mm.
the battle, he or she gets to write the history, and that's what
Sure.
has been driven
Sure.
down. That's what has been given to us, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
one funny thing, a lot of people like one thing that floats on the internet so much is write on Google who's the seventh most famous girl or something, and then the name Justin Bieber pops up, right? It
Yeah.
started
Yeah.
as a joke, but the Google algorithm that it picked that up, right? So you say a lie long enough and it certainly becomes truth.
Sure.
And I
Yep.
believe all of it boils down to how much dopamine our brain gets. The number of likes, the number of subscribers, the number of comments that we get, and it has I think spoiled the this generation that had abundance of access to the internet, and the first generation that actually had social media when they were born. So I want to ask Sid, what are the mental health implications? Because the last episode that I did was about mental health, and this is something that it
Sure.
has that's been in my mind. The dopamine, how does it affect our brain? How does it affect our actions? Because there's one thing that my friend and I were talking about called dopamine detox. So उसमें क्या होता है, you just have to
Mm.
sit doing nothing, like whatever gives you any teeny bit of joy, you don't have to do that. You can't eat good food, you don't get to use social media, like anything that just say you get dopamine, right? So I want to understand the mental health implications of social media, and how does it boils down to how much dopamine we get from every like, from every comment and everything.
See, Manik, I'm not a mental health expert, but I can tell you how it starts because
Yeah.
I think everyone who's tried their hands at being some sort of a social media figure has always gone through this. I'd like to bring up an important sort of concept over here that maybe our viewers and our listeners can sort of also benefit from. And I'm going to demonstrate a quick example of it as well. Back in World War II, when the Americans sort of had their airplanes come in after a battle, a lot of scientists sort of took a look at the plane and said, our planes are taking too much of bullet damage. So let's figure out where we can put armor on the plane. And to do that, what they did was they started studying where the bullet holes were, maximum number of bullet holes, where were they? It turns out the bullet holes were mainly around the tail fin, that is the most sort of the backward portion of the tail as well, on the wings, and on like in the broadest part of the fuselage, the broadest part of the body, um, and not on the cockpit, not on the other tail section, none of that. And so like we do this thought experiment a lot of times by showing the same picture, and if you guys can Google this later on, you all will find this picture. And when people look at this picture of bullet holes all over the wings and things like that, and you ask them, where would you put the maximum armor? They'd say, oh, we put it either on the wings or the fin, or exactly where the bullet holes are. And see, that's the problem. These are the planes that survived and came back. We're missing the point of this. If
Oh
there were too
yes.
many bullet holes
Right,
in
right.
the cockpit and in the other parts, the plane wouldn't come back for us to study in the first place. This entire thing, this concept that is being demonstrated, we call it survivorship bias. And I think everyone is ingrained with survivorship bias because we are so falsely led to believe in sources of motivation from people that have succeeded. Um, we have gone through the stories of so many entrepreneurs, so many people, so many scientists, so many great athletes, and we say, "Oh, if they can do it, so can we." No way. What are we talking about? Who are we kidding? Like, really? That is like a minuscule percentage of people that are successful, and therefore we talk about them. It's like the bullet holes again. You are looking at a picture without seeing what the picture doesn't tell you, right? You're only biased towards the survivor because that's the only thing you see or hear of. And with social media, everyone sort of falls into this trap of, oh, if there's a Carrie Minati, oh, if there's a Bhuvan Bam, oh, if there's an Ashish Chanslani, I can be them too, without realizing that there are so many different failure stories that come with it. And there are so many different added despairs, hours of dedication, so much time, effort, so much learning, because you constantly have to keep learning in any field. That really goes through with all of this. Just to give you a statistic, I was reading the other day. In the past decade, Manik, there are 80 million songs that Indians have created.
Wow.
80 million songs only out of India.
Yeah.
And out of these 80 million songs, only 300 songs so far in this entire decade have over 100 million views on YouTube. Do you see the ratio here? It's like 1 in 300,000. That's the statistic we are basically trying to avoid when we say, oh, if T series can do it, so can my record label. Or, oh, if so and so artist can create this, then why can't we? Um, I think this sort of leads to such a huge imbalance in what expectations are and what reality will therefore issue out. And that's where the whole mental issue realm sort of starts, because you have expectations that are just so misaligned from what can really happen to you. You start expecting a particular number of likes, you start expecting views, you start expecting subscribers, you start expecting, I'm doing the best I can, is the sort of thing that most content creators say. And maybe they are, maybe they're right, but there are so many other factors involved in addition to merit. We're always ingrained with this: if you work hard enough, you'll get there. No, you won't. You have to work smart. You can't work hard, because if you work smart, you realize it's not just work that leads you from whatever state you are to a higher state. It takes so many n number of factors depending on what you want to do. I think this whole dopamine deficit starts because the first few thousand likes we get, or the first few 50 subscribers you get, uh, sort of charge you up and make you say, all right, what's coming next? And that just leads to a lot of despair, because you keep craving, you keep wanting it without realizing that with the current rate you're going at, there is a glass ceiling that you will never be able to cross. There will be a barrier, there will be a saturation point that eventually you will reach, in terms of likes, subscribers, followers, and so on. And so it's just such a huge imbalance that we sort of lose ourselves. And that's only to say that sometimes it's okay to give up. Sometimes it's okay to say, "Hey, I'm never going to get there, I'm never going to get a million subscribers, I'm okay with 100,000, or I'm never going to get 100,000, I'm okay with 10,000." Or so, whatever your statistic that you think realistically you're able to get, that's okay to do, right? At the same time, I feel like you should not burn yourself out trying to try too hard, because that's only going to sort of mess with your mental chemistry once again. So it's just, it's all in the head. It starts there, and it sort of eats itself up. It's very important not to get caught in such a survivorship bias, really.
Said what an answer, and I really appreciate your demonstration of the survivorship bias. So one of my first LinkedIn posts was about this. That I see a lot of people telling their successful stories. Okay, I got into Google, I got into Microsoft, my YC gave me a funding of what $10 million, blah blah blah, all of these things, right? And I asked them, why don't you put your struggle stories when you are actually going through them? Because a person who joins LinkedIn will only see these stories. No, okay, that person got success, that person got success. Okay, this happened, this happened, this happened, which obviously puts a lot of pressure and also gives again, the survivorship bias that, okay, if 10, like 9 out of my 10 posts are about success, why not me? I can do that, right? So that happened. I posted about it. uh, and and the dopamine, like what you talked about, that we get first 1,000 likes or first 50 subscribers and it sort of charges us up. This happens in almost everything. uh, Recent example about fitness. So one of my friends, I got him into fitness. So like when you start uh, counting your calories and working out religiously, like with good tracking your macronutrients and everything, you lose your water fat very quickly, right? So that person was like,
Mm,
okay,
mm,
up to I lost my fat. He did not know that that's water fat. That's very easy to lose, but the main thing comes after that, right? So again, I think I could relate to your example of how we get first 50 subscribers, first 1,000 likes, followers, blah blah blah, and then it just boosts us up, which is a good thing.
yeah,
But then you may not realize how much hard work is going to be. If you have 1,000 followers, then how many people are actually going to see your content? How would you stay
mm,
relevant if you get more and more followers? All of these things. One thing that I do a lot when I create content, I just make sure that I'm moving closer to my vision. I don't care how many followers I get. I don't care how many listeners I have on the podcast. My vision is to make sure that the education content, the content that I got access to, the conversations that I could get to have with people, when I moved from a very small town of Punjab to a bigger city and then to a different country after that. How can I make sure that I send out that content to people who may not be as privileged as I was. And I just make sure that I get 1% better every day. I just don't I just don't track, okay, how many followers, how many blah blah listeners, all of these things.
yep,
I just want to be
yep.
like, my only competition is myself. I just want to be better 1% every day. With every episode has to be 1% better, and not in terms of the listeners, but in terms of the conversation I have. How can I get the maximum out of my guest? How can I make sure that the conversation goes, what I want to, like, whatever my objective is out of the conversation, I just want to fulfill that, right? And whenever I post on Instagram, like on my any of the social medias, I just post and ghost. I just post and I just move on. I don't obviously I see the analytics and everything, but I don't let them to get into my head. Okay, हाँ यार, इस बार तो instead of 100 listeners I just got 80, instead of like 80 likes I just got 30. I don't let these things go into my head, right? um Sid, one thing that I want to ask you: what is the one thing, no, again, let's not say one thing, what are the things that millennials had but the Gen Z would not? Because the Gen Z got, like, Gen Z has a lot of abundance. Millennials may have seen a bit of scarcity in terms of the convenience, in terms of social media and everything, but Gen Z may not. Gen Z obviously would not have. And even I am Gen Z. Like I was born in 1997, but that's almost like a cusp of Gen Z. So I want to ask, what did the millennials have that Gen Z would not?
I think this is always gonna happen, right? Like where you're always um gonna listen to this, and really at the end of the day, it doesn't mean anything because today my parents say, oh, हमारे ज़माने में ये होता था. Oh, we used to have these resources, and therefore we did whatever we could to the best of our abilities. You're not giving us enough credit. Now the
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
is, I think like with every generation passing, there's something or the other happening. um this is the 19th century when people started making statements like, everything that has to be invented has already been invented, and then you realize how wrong you were. And in that century, you had the airplane, the automobile, and so on
yeah,
and so
yeah.
forth coming. And
But I think the
it's just
speed
it's
the speed of abundance, like I think World War II was one of the defining moments, because I think a lot of a lot of inventions happened during World War II. And the second like the fast rapid abundance happened during the social media era. So that's what I like. I think that's what where the difference is. The rapidness of the abundance, that was different for let's say someone in the 19th century, and then the 20th century when the World War happened.
I think it all, I mean, naturally it all comes down to one simple thing, and that is how much funding do we have for research and technology. It's at the end of the day, it all boils down to that. Because if you see, even during World War II and before that, and of course throughout the Cold War and things like that, we used to have all the funding that was there, that was directed to research and technology, wasn't towards fields like medicine or transportation or communication. It was more in aligned to defense contracting, more aligned to military usage, and you know as in when after the UN and things like that, when countries started settling down and there were still sort of strife, there is still strife going on in a lot of countries ever since. Um, Keep those countries aside for a second and look at the bigger picture. If you see on a global scale, the funding that research and technology has received over time has increased abundantly. And that sort of determines the pace at which you start developing new technology. That sort of, sort of fuels the entire um, ecosystem where you say, all right, if XYZ number of grants are sort of given out to research departments, you can have so many different solutions to things. It's all about that, to be really honest. And of course, as currencies have inflated and things like that, there's obviously so much more money to go around when it comes to technology and things like that. But to answer your question, Manik, I think with millennials, what millennials had, uh, and what Gen Z doesn't have, is, I think, how I would like to frame it. Because we had an element of um, a CRT TV, where we just wanted to sort of turn on Cartoon Network every time we came back from school. Wanted to watch it, have like a post lunch, uh, nap around for an hour, wake up in the evening, go out, uh, play some cricket, come back, um, and just call it a night. Like, we had the simplicity of doing things and having to walk to those things if we wanted to do it. Whereas now you've got like all those things that I've said. You've got Cartoon Network, you've got a game of cricket, you've got lullabies to put you to sleep, all in the same device. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
it's this space of wanting to understand that we had the freedom of moving from one place to another, and Gen Z probably doesn't, or probably does. And it's what you're grown up with at the end of the day, that your preferences sort of stick around to that. I don't think anyone from Gen Z and beyond is ever going to understand what it's like, um, to live the lives that we lived when we were kids, Manik. And it's perfectly okay, because that is their version of the truth, that is their version of reality, and they don't have anything to compare it with. And no matter how much we try and push the fact that, hey, listen, we didn't have as many resources, they're never going to relate with it, because that's their version of reality. I feel like all kind of competitive spirit, at least in social media and otherwise for that matter, is relative to one another in that given time frame. Nobody cares about what we had or didn't have at the end of the day. It's all about what we have today and how we're making the most of it. It's like car races or bike races in the 70s or 80s would top out at 120, 150 kilometers an hour, and that was considered death godly speeds. And today you've got every third person owning a bike that does that on a highway, and it's nothing crazy, right? So it's just relative. The competition level and what people can sort of compare themselves to is relevant only to that particular point of time. And that's why we always kind of keep saying that we need to learn from the people that are younger to us. So we need to learn from people um, that have had for such technology from a much younger age. Because obviously, if you look at their resume, they've been using it for far longer than we have, right?
Yeah.
If
Hmm.
someone's 10 years old and I'm 20 years old, and say the internet was invented 10 years ago, right? This guy has had it for all his life. I've only had it for half of mine. Do you see what I'm trying to say? It's just
Yes.
it's all a
Yes.
matter
Yes.
of what they had, what we had. It's not the same, but we're living in today. So we just all need to sort of keep up, and sort of, stop thinking about what we had and what we didn't have. At the same time, right? I mean, there's always a nostalgic appreciation for those things. But we can't be too caught up in it as well. That's what I genuinely feel.
I really agree with we can't be too much caught up in this. And I think one of the things that we did not have was decision fatigue because इतना choice ही नहीं था. Like, if I have to watch TV at 5 p.m. सिर्फ Pokemon ही था. No matter उसमें क्या था, if there's Pikachu just standing there for 20 minutes, I will have to watch that because I don't have Netflix. I don't have Prime or any other OTT platform. I don't have the abundance of cartoon cartoon channels. I did not have, and more importantly, if my dad or if my mom wants to watch TV at 5 p.m., then you would have to,
Oh yeah.
like, come to a common ground. And that common ground would always be ki you can't watch that. If your mom, if your dad, or even if your elder sister has to watch something on the TV, you just had one TV. You don't have
Yeah.
that the privilege of having a mobile and just turning on your Wi-Fi and watching Netflix or whatever,
Yeah.
right? So I think one of the things that we did not have much was decision fatigue. But now the abundance of food, the abundance of content, the social media, with all the cutting edge technologies, there's a huge abundance out there, right? Sid, I want to ask, how does this abundance, how does the, especially in terms of social media, how does it hinder your personal and social growth? Because uh, let's go 15 years back, right? Let's go to 2005. Um, so what used to happen? Like, I used to play and blah blah, like, watch cartoon and everything, but at night I used to be with my parents watching anything. I don't remember 2005. It may be Kasauti Zindagi Ki or
Oh
Kyunki
God.
Saas Bhi Kahi Bahoti, whatever. Or watching watching news with my family, or watching cricket match. And even cricket did not, it was not as much as it happens now. We have
Sure.
IPL, we have other leagues, we have the international cricket as well. But utna cricket hota hi nahi tha, right? So at the end, I sit with my family रात को. We watch one single thing, and we understand ki, okay, let's say if the news is about uh, killing of an animal. So if we have four family members, तो उसमें से एक रिएक्ट कर रहा है कि ओ व्हाट अ pathetic thing, एक रिएक्ट कर रहा है कि ठीक है, then one is reacting that's very horrible, and one simply does not react. It tells you a lot about every person sitting there, right? And it also tells you about yourself. So you connect with yourself, you connect with your family, you understand ki how what thoughts, what opinions, what are the beliefs, what are the values of your parents, or your parent, your guardian, your siblings, whoever you are with, right? But now it does not happen. You have lot of TVs, you have mobile and everything. So probably 9 baje you just switch on your phone, or you are already on WhatsApp, Instagram, talking to someone, or just watching something, right? So the time to connect with your family, and most importantly the time to connect with yourself, is no more there. बिकॉज दिमाग को डोपामीन चाहिए. तो यू पोस्ट इंस्टाग्राम जल्दी जल्दी, कुछ हाँ लाइक्स आए, you try to understand क्योंकि what would be the best time for me to post so that I get the maximum likes.
Hmm.
Also read dopamine, right? So how has this thing, this setting affected and will affect the personal and social growth of a person?
So when I was opening up my YouTube channel, I sort of went through a lot of videos, instructionals, and things like that because, to be honest, I always wanted to do it, but I was always looking for an opportune time to do it. and for the right context to sort of come about. Um, One of the things that people kept saying that really annoyed me at the time and still does is find your niche. Yeah, find a market niche, and a lot of entrepreneurs would say that as well. Now, the reason it annoyed me was because at the time I did not have a market niche. Therefore, I was pretty mainstream. Um, it's just when you start to understand what a market niche is that you start understanding that things are breaking away from the mainstream into these niches very very quickly with the abundance that you spoke of. Say, for instance, what MTV used to be back in the day to what it has become now. We
Oh,
used to
yes,
listen to a
yes,
lot of
yes.
rock music back in the day, and
Yeah, yeah,
basically it was a music channel, wasn't it? And then we
yeah,
realized, oh,
absolutely.
okay, everyone doesn't like all kinds of music, so we started breaking the niches up. We started having, okay, 1 hour of pop music, 1 hour of rock music, 1 hour of so on and so forth. And it just kept disintegrating so much that MTV said, "Oh, chuck it. We can't offer everything to everyone because it's not mainstream anymore." Um, the thing with this is, there's a concept of hyperconnective, right? And it's a concept which doesn't, which well actually is exactly the opposite of what it sounds like. The concept of hyperconnectivity is such that because of the internet, right, and all the tools on the internet, and I'm not just saying social media, I'm saying everything, right, put together, um, has brought us all so close together and presented an individual with so many opportunities and opinions to follow that we are not able to connect with everyone. So let me give you a very classic example of this. Say I'm sitting here, internet has just arrived at my doorstep. I'm like, oh, it's great, it's fantastic. I open up the internet, I start browsing things, right? I look up something as simple as how to make aloo ki sabzi. Okay? बहुत simple cheese. And I start looking at so many different recipes. There's like a bunch of different recipes right there, right? That say people have already uploaded at the time, right? Whatever. किसी में जीरे का तड़का डालो, किसी में राई का तड़का डालो. And something this subtle is already dividing, because it's always like a multi-cotinous key at the end of the day. One thing branches into so many different things. Um, तो अब जीरे के तड़के वाले फैंस एक हो गए, राई के तड़के वाले फैंस एक हो गए, and then it just keeps dividing because you have so many different options of food, so many different ways of eating it, so many different things you can follow in food trends, so many cuisines, so many sub cuisines. मेरे को तो यही पता नहीं था so long back that French cuisine was bizarre. I thought all bizarre food comes under this cuisine of bizarre, never eat it.
Yeah, yeah,
And then I
yeah,
realized even the bizarre has a taste and a quality. So the French make frogs separately, as the Indonesians do, as the Taiwanese do, and so on. It's
yeah,
just
yeah,
people have so many options and opinions to follow now that they can decide for themselves what they want to follow and what they cannot. And this is true for all kinds of opinion streams, all kinds of sort of all freedoms of choosing things, right? You can choose as deeply as possible for anything. You can be absolutely passionateless about everything in your life, say politics, religion, education, all these topics you could be absolutely numb to. But when I talk about my favorite car, I like a particular year, a particular brand, a model, and a particular make, and it's just so particular, right? People have the access to these particulars now. And the problem with that is everyone around you, therefore, becomes that much more different, because the probability of finding someone that finds and likes exactly the same things as you drops to an all time low. And that's the problem with hyperconnectivity. The closer you think you're connected to everyone else thanks to the internet, the further away you become from them, right? And it's because of this abundance that you realize that, something like social media, for that matter, right? is not so social at the end of the day, though, is it? Like, because if I'm going to sort of start creating content like someone else, right, and trying to tap into that market niche, if I make one different move from that person, I've already created a new market niche for myself. If I start talking about
Yes.
my videos on my channel, right,
Mhm.
I am well in the godforsaken podcast space, but I don't call myself a podcast because I highly believe in the video element of things. So I genuinely feel like I have created a niche in myself of content where people can listen to it if they want to, but there is always a visual element attached to all of that. There's a lot you can communicate in body language, and there's a lot that is right there. Um, Also with the time at which the whole thing came out, the aim was very clear. People who are sitting at home really need to talk about these things, and therefore they should come close. So it's just not the same as yours, or say Joe Rogan's, or say Ranveer Alabade, or any of these guys. My thing is different. I've created a niche in myself. Now picture this, and this is going to be a very dangerous picture for everyone to start listening to and say, oh my god,
Okay,
everyone,
let me
right?
fasten my seat belts.
Yeah, everyone for that matter is a market niche in themselves, because nobody will be exactly the same as one another. That is the eventual conclusion that we all come to, that like our fingerprints, our opinions, even though they might be the same, might have varying amplitudes and varying intensities, to be honest. So like if I like pizza, you might not like pizza as much as me, but you still like it. But we are different in that, because you might pick something else over a pizza, I wouldn't, right? It's just everyone becomes so different because everything they start doing has their own personal flavor, their own personal tadka in it. Everyone comes with their own personality, and no two personalities can ever be the same. Therefore, you are your only fan, right? Especially when you are so hyper connected. Um, and this just brings me to a very important thing I keep telling people all the time, is that everyone has a different opinion. Even if you think you have the same opinion, you really don't have the same opinion. And therefore, everyone's opinion is either right or wrong, doesn't matter. But everyone is wrong and everyone is right at the same time, right? So I always say an opinion is like an asshole. Everyone has one and they all stink, right? It's basically everyone is within themselves. You are you, that's it. There's no following. And even if there is a following, these are people that look up to you but will never 100% relate with you, right? And that's what hyperconnectivity is. The more isolated the more connected you want to be, the more isolated therefore you become. And I think that's a huge impact on anyone's mental state or anyone's personal growth, because you always like the idea of a happy ending where there's someone by your bedside before you die. Because even in the end of your life, even in death, you don't want to be alone, which is a very which is a neoclassically stupid thing to think about, that you will not die alone, but you eventually will. But even in that, you want to see someone by your side. It's this craving, this dopamine you pointed out, this craving for personal connect that people sort of keep losing out on, understanding that really they're just all by themselves and there's really nobody with them, standing by them. Therefore, the only way you fight it is to get along. The only way you fight it is by being respectful of everyone else's niches, of being less picky, of being less choosy, of being less attached to your own likes and dislikes, being less attached to your own market niche. That's when you can start looking out of the shell, and that's when you can say, okay, yeah, maybe I can accommodate other people's opinions too. But you cross the line over when, again, you start grandstanding and want to be part of those people. Then you say, oh, I'm so on and so forth, just to sort of relate with them. It's almost like the first time दोस्त ने beer पिला दी तो हमने बोला हाँ मजा आया, but actually मुझे बहुत कड़वी लगी, right? Just an example. So it's
Yeah.
one of those
Yeah.
things where you start grandstanding and you cross that line, and you're like, now you're like, oh, I'm all with the people because everyone thinks I have the same opinion as them. Well, it's not possible. And I think everyone listening to this podcast now knows it's just not possible for people to have the same opinion, or for people to relate with the same opinion, because in most cases they're really not telling you the truth. So yeah.
I believe nothing in the world is objective except maths and just part of science. I believe
Not
everything
even
else,
that.
is, yeah, like no,
Not
one
even
plus
that,
one.
Manik.
One plus one. I think it has to be two. But other things like
I
everything.
I would love for it to be. It's all about, like, I know there's a lot of, like, again, being a science student, I can tell you this. I
Yeah.
it's There's a lot of ambiguity to a lot of things, a lot of concepts in math and science. There are, and I was talking to a few people recently, and I was telling them there are
Mm,
problems, mathematical problems that nobody's found solutions to in over a
yeah.
hundred years.
Yeah.
Think about it, right? It's just a
Mm-hmm.
math problem. It's like a couple of sentences long. Nobody's figured it out in 100 years. I mean, if
Yeah.
it was that objective, we would be able to solve everything, wouldn't we? If one
Yeah.
plus one was always two, and if everything is as objective and black and white as that, we'd be able to solve everything. But we don't. We don't have all the answers. And so to assume that everything is black or white is, or everything should be black or white, regardless of what field it is in, I think is not justified, because most things lie in the gray. And every opinion, every view, or every statement is nuanced. There's always depth. There's always more to it than what you see. And the more effort you put in trying to find that nuance, the more you'll be able to understand where someone or something comes from at the end of the day.
Right. Very interesting. And I think, all of these things lie on a spectrum, right? Like, as you said, there's nothing black and white, there's a huge gray area. And you gave an example of asshole, relating it with an opinion. Everyone has one, and it stings. And I want to say that's a really good anal orgy. But jokes apart, I just wanted to, I just wanted to say that out here. Anyway, Sid, so one of my guests, Elaine, we talked about, so we are like talking about social awareness, and she said that instead of focusing on things that divide us, why not focus on things that join us? We were talking about racism and various like Islamophobia, fat phobia, all of these things. And I want to ask you, how do we break this spiral of dopamine? And again, I think dopamine detox is really really hard. When I was talking to my friend about dopamine detox, like he introduced me to this concept. It's damn difficult to practice that. So in just wanted to ask, how do we break this spiral? How do we come out of this vicious cycle of dopamine, and our obsession with likes, number of subscribers, and all of these things?
I think with the dopamine thing, like I genuinely feel like the rush of dopamine, so to say. I apologize to everyone who knows the scientific terminology for this, but I feel like everyone that feels that rush feels it at the stage of conceptualization. They feel it when an idea emerges and the idea seems exciting. I wouldn't even say it comes when the idea is exciting, because we get to that much later in our minds. Before that, all that happens, we are already so excited because there's a new idea, and because it seems exciting, we sort of have that dopamine rush that now we want to keep pursuing that idea, and now we want to keep following it. um, the problem is we enjoy conceptualizing and trying to make these ideas up in our heads because we are crazy uh, people. The whole fact that we have an IQ tells you that a lot of things can be intellectualized without being practiced. And we enjoy that. We enjoy our little bubbles that we have in our minds, and we enjoy sort of living in them, and saying, oh yeah, that's definitely what I'd like to do. I mean, how many times have you come out of an argument and said, oh, maybe if I had said this would have been a better thing. The next time someone says something like this to me, I will say this. It's an invariable thing of thoughts leading to the dopamine rush. But when you start putting things to practice, when you start getting into the groove of materializing your thoughts, that's where you realize that the dopamine just isn't enough, you know. And consequently, you also realize that the dopamine is sort of what will get you through, because you need to stay excited and motivated throughout the hard work. And slowly and gradually, the dopamine fades away, and your vision becomes the main reason why something has to be done. A good example of this would be the whole journey of Iron Man, because he started off as someone who enjoyed the idea of being Iron Man, who enjoyed being Iron Man, and then realized there's a sense of responsibility in him being a certain way, and then that responsibility became more important than whatever he was feeling about being that. I feel like uh, people need to realize that once they start um, following their thoughts, right, it's gonna seem 10,000 times harder than they actually imagined it. So like my parents keep telling me something. They keep saying something like or ye bachpan se sunta aa raha hu that beta, when you're well settled and you have your own family and
Yeah.
all of that, get us a tiny house in a village, and so on, and you know,
Yeah.
दो चार बकरियां पाल लेंगे and कुछ
Mm-hmm.
ये करेंगे,
Yes.
farming करेंगे थोड़ी सी, and basically want to live a very quiet life, and so on and so forth. Now for everyone there would be a different sort of thought process, but it's when I grew up, it's when I turned 17, 18, and I heard these statements, and I told them, तुम लोग की कमर में दर्द होता है अभी, तुम लोगों को क्या लगता है, तुम लोग भेड़ बकरियां पाल सकते हो? It's not as straightforward. It's, listen, it's so out there, right?
Yeah.
It's like the most obvious thing is, it's nice when you think about it, but when you actually want to get your hands dirty, it's either your enthusiasm fades away, or you become more focused on your goal. If, and this is something that I'd like to say to everyone, all entrepreneurs, all people on social media that are starting businesses, everyone on social media that's not even doing a business but is motivated by the idea of it, here's what I have to ask you. This is really something you ask yourself at the end of the day. Is this what you think your purpose is? Because if you think this justifies your purpose, if you think this is what is going to get you through, if you think this is what you've been wanting to do, and that's why the whole idea equals dopamine makes sense, then get your hands dirty and get into it and see if you like it. See, one other thing with this whole abundance thing that we spoke of earlier is that now that people have so many options, they also have the options to back out of those options real quick, right? So it's perfectly fine for someone to try something, not like it, know soon enough, pull out and get into something else. So it's always one thing to say, all right, you know what, this idea excites me. But when you sit down with pen and paper, that's when you try and figure out if it's practical, if the logistics are right, if it's feasible financially. There's so many aspects to it when you get down to the nitty gritties, to the nuances. Like I say, um, it's always gonna sort of uh, be a little harder for your dopamine to keep up. And it's not even with career choices or whatever. Like if I'm going to talk about something as simple as uh, दोस्तों के गोवा जाने का plan, yeah, it's so simple. It's a beautiful idea. सारे दोस्त हर साल हर दोस्त का ग्रुप एक ना एक बार बोलता है ये चलो गोवा चलते हैं, and it's amazing.
Yes. Yes.
The idea कि गोवा चलते हैं बहुत मस्त है, but तुम
Right.
करने जाते हो तब सबके हाथ में आ जाती है. That is the thing. That's what I'm talking about. When you try it, it's when you get to it, when you want to do it, that's when your dopamine dies. If you will not, and this is how you stop the dopamine rush in your head, if you realize that's not something you want to pursue, right, and you don't even want to try it, that's when you realize that's not the kind of rush you need to focus on. That's not the kind of. I remember when I started my entrepreneurship journey, um, I always used to be attracted to a lot of business ideas because the world was open. It was all out there. I was like, "Huh, ye bhi opportunity. Oh, brilliant idea. Oh, fantastic." And it was very exciting, Manik. But it all comes down to, is that what I really want to do? Is that something I will, enjoy? Is that my purpose? Does it fit in with what I'm currently doing? There's so many things to think about. And that's when I started realizing that the things that I don't necessarily think will help me in the long run, or the things I don't think I would want to pursue in the long run, I just eliminate them. I just let those ideas go. I just let it say, all right, you know what? Not for me, not doing it. Because if I pursue it, I'm not going to do justice to it. Because that's not what I want to do. I got in it just because मेरे को dopamine था. मेरे दिमाग में मेरे को कुछ हुआ. I said, okay, let's do it. But when I got to it, I'm just not enjoying myself, and I'm not able to give my 100% to it either. So, I mean, my advice would basically be that, ask yourself, is that what you really want to do? If you think it is, great, follow it, pursue it. Even then, if you realize that's not something you want to do, pull out. I think the art of saying no, the art of giving up at the right time, when you know that this is the best thing you can do, is to pull away. I think that is an art to be learned by Gen Z, and of course the generations to come. And kudos to technology, and kudos to everyone for sort of pitching in more kinds of jobs and more number of jobs in the world, that you are now able to sort of get into it, get out of it, get into something else. Gen Z has the privilege of doing it, and I think they should make the most of it, instead of falling into this dopamine trap and just sticking to something they don't really want to do.
Absolutely said. And a few things that I would like to add to the answer. First is connecting yourself to a bigger purpose, not associating yourself to certain outcomes, like that okay, if I reach 1000 subscribers, okay, then that's good, like that's my first goal. But when you connect to a bigger purpose, okay, I want to impact people no matter what, no matter how, if the way A or the option A is not there, I'll take option B, which will eventually lead me to my purpose, right? So that's one of the things. Second, I think and I want to throw in a school of philosophy called Stoicism. I've just started exploring that, but I think it has a lot to do with making peace with your emotions and then toning them down. Well, I'm still exploring it, and I have one of my friends who I'll speak to about stoicism probably in by next month. But then I'm really excited to explore this school of thought, school of philosophy. But anyway, I said it's always a delight to speak to you, and as much as I want to, it's very difficult to contain your wisdom, to contain your knowledge, to contain your ideas in one episode of, let even if it's for 2 hours. It's really difficult because so this is
No,
like
it's,
the, wait, this is second time we are speaking on a, like in an audio form,
yeah,
and you leave me
yeah.
with with a feeling of awe every time. Like हर बार I सोचता हूँ यार, fuck man, this is one person who challenges my thoughts, yes, but also adds so much value in just 1 hour, and I'm always amazed. And this is one of those episodes ki yaar, हाँ मतलब fuck yaar, like you blew my mind, as the previous
I'm
conversation.
I'm
Yeah,
I'm humbled, Manik. Thank you so much. But I have to say, I mean, the last thing you said about connecting yourself to a bigger purpose is therefore, something that comes with internalizing, comes with
yeah, yeah.
thinking about it. And it's only when you, me, our viewers, everyone sits down and keeps asking, so what? Why? How, keeps questioning themselves, keeps reading to find the answers, or maybe internalizes the answers and tries to test those theories out. It's when we become experimental in our methods, in our minds, that's when we come closer to uh, or the closest we can come to truth, per se. So I've always just tried to do that, and I'm sure you and everyone listening is also constantly in a phase of internalizing and trying to reach the truth for themselves.
Very interesting concept about internalizing, and I would love to explore this uh, in the
Yep,
next
man.
coming episodes with you. I would really, and I'm
Awesome,
like,
awesome.
I'm doing this on air with you ki, yeah, please, let's do another episodes in coming weeks. But Sid, do you have any
For sure.
signing off note? And with your signing off note, I want you to add one thing, because I've seen you're an amazing storyteller. You're probably one of the best storytellers I've ever met. So with your signing off note about the topic, obviously, that we discussed, how people can take care of their health, like their mental health in this uh, hodgepodge of social media and all of these things. If you can also throw in a few tips about storytelling, and this is a very selfish thing, okay, because I believe your storytelling is amazing. So if you can also add that, that would be good.
I think the best stories. I think this is something that everyone will notice. The best stories are ones that you have mostly experienced. Right? The best stories are the ones that you have been
Absolutely.
physically and mentally and emotionally closest to, simply because you are
Mhm.
there, you're living it, and you are able to attach the emotional aspect to it. You're able to attach to the entire event happening around you, what the mindset is and what you're thinking while all that is happening. And that just makes your voice so much stronger and so much clearer, because then you know, all right, this is what this guy is going through. And then people sort of buy into you and buy into your vision, because they realize what things might seem like on the surface have a much deeper meaning from your perspective. So it's always important to do that while telling a story. But more so, if I were to sign off, I'd only like to leave with another tiny story, if you don't mind me doing it. And
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
a story
that's
that
a
didn't happen to
your
me, but
story. Your story is dopamine for me. So, absolutely, I would love another story.
no, no. So there was this little girl that lived somewhere in the US, and she had a dog. Uh, and her neighbor, who she was very good friends with, had a pet rabbit. And this one time, this one afternoon, while the parents were away and the neighbors were away, and this girl was sitting alone in her room, her dog comes with a rabbit in his mouth, a dead rabbit in his mouth. And the rabbit was the neighbor's rabbit. So this girl was scared. She said, "Oh my God, what do I do? I mean, my dog killed this rabbit. What do I do to make up for it? Because my friend's going to be extremely upset." So she washes the rabbit up, the dead rabbit, cleans it, brushes it, walks over to the neighbor's yard, and leaves the rabbit there in the neighbor's yard under a tree, and comes back, hoping that her friend will think that the rabbit died naturally. And in the evening, when her family came back, and the neighbors came back eventually, there was a huge commotion. A lot of people gathered around that yard, and a lot of people looking at the tree, and this little girl comes peeking around, trying to see what's going on. And uh, uh, and she hears her friend's father saying, "Well, this rabbit had died. We had buried it properly. I don't know which psychopath took it out, cleaned it, and put it right under the tree." Your
Wow.
version of the truth is never the actual truth. Everyone has a different angle of truth. You're all aiming in the same direction, but you'll never get there. You're never going to reach any point called absolute truth. Everyone's truth is different. Everyone has their own lives, everyone has their own experiences. You can be inspired from other people, but be happy with who you are, and sort of understand that everyone has their own truths, and we can all get along by respecting each other's versions of truth instead of pushing our versions on everyone else. That's my message.
Beautiful, beautiful story, beautiful message said. And one thing that came to my mind was that we are all criminals, we are all villains in someone else's story, right? Yes,
And
making
heroes in our
peace.
own.
Yeah, absolutely. Making peace with this fact that there's your story, that there's my story, my version of truth, and then there's the truth. It's very difficult,
Yeah.
but it also leads you to a happier,
Very
greater life.
relevant to social media because everyone needs to
Yeah.
understand that social media just gives you an aspect of the truth and not its entirety. So,
Huh,
yeah,
100%, 100%. Anyway, Sid, thank you
yeah.
so much for being on the Manikamana podcast. I really want to do another episode, not one, but a lot of other episodes with you. It's been a delight.
Sure, sure,
Thank you
sure.
so much.